Hello and welcome to After the Headlines. I am Sarza, speaking to you from Dhaka. This is a space where we pause, breathe, and look beneath the breaking news to understand the stories, emotions, histories, and people that rarely make it into the headlines themselves. Today, I want to talk about something unfolding right here in Bangladesh. If you've seen the news lately, you've probably noticed the country has been everywhere. Images of protests, tension, institutions under pressure, fear among minority communities, and a lot of noise. And with those headlines come the familiar explanations. Words like extremism, right-wing wave, radicalization, all the frameworks that fit neatly into international commentary. And I understand why that happens. Labels make the world feel easier to understand. But the truth is, those labels don't fully explain what's happening here. So today, let's sit together calmly, gently, and try to understand the story after the headlines. Let me begin with something important. Violence, intimidation, fear, especially toward journalists or minorities. None of that is acceptable, full stop. But condemning violence alone doesn't answer the deeper question. Why are so many people feeling this unheard, this unseen, this excluded? Because what Bangladesh is facing right now isn't just a battle between religious versus secular forces or left versus right. It's actually an ideological crisis rooted in representation. For a long time, our political institutions, our cultural spaces, haven't fully reflected the diversity of real social experience in this country. So ideology here becomes a language, a way for people to express exclusion, frustration, dignity, and aspiration when formal channels don't feel real. And honestly, I think many countries in the world are experiencing their own versions of that. In Bangladesh, so much of our national identity, especially the legacy of 1971, has become closely linked to political parties and elite spaces. Over time, the ownership of national symbols narrowed. To feel properly national, in quotes, you almost had to sound a certain way, dress a certain way, belong to certain circles. National identity became something you performed, not something you lived. And those who didn't fit the mold were often seen as less credible, less informed, less right for the national story. When that happens, the gap between the nation and its people grows, and something fractures inside the social fabric. People aren't just unheard, they're structurally excluded from the places where meaning and authority are produced, and exclusion always finds a language. This is the context in which figures like Osman Hadi rose to prominence. Outside Bangladesh, he has been described with familiar labels and seen through a reductionist lens. But that misses something important. Hadi spoke in ways that ordinary people, ordinary Bangladeshis, could understand without being spoken down to. He could move comfortably from fish markets to courtrooms, from debating halls to street conversations. He wasn't trying to perform politics. He was trying to discuss power, fairness, dignity as lived realities. He also spoke openly about discrimination he felt as a visibly religious student at Dhaka University in elite academic spaces. And that forces us to confront a difficult truth. Even in a Muslim-majority country, visible religiosity outside elite-approved norms can be treated as backward. Respectability politics exists here as well. Some people must constantly soften or translate themselves to be heard. Others don't. And that shapes who is allowed to speak for the nation. When Hadi died, thousands of people attended his funeral. For many, this was about more than grief. It was a moment of collective recognition, a rupture in the national psyche. A point where people felt that long unspoken injustices, long silenced frustrations had crystallized into a single symbolic moment. Here, martyrdom doesn't glorify death, it becomes a moral language, a way communities express belonging and exclusion when other languages fail. And I think much of the international coverage so far didn't fully grasp that emotional weight. Now let's talk about slogans like Inqilab Zindabad. The phrase means long live revolution. It has a long history in South Asia across different moments and ideologies. Today, its use signals a symbolic rupture, a way of saying we want to be part of the national story, but not only through the vocabulary approved by institutions. For decades, Joy Bangla represented liberation and sovereignty, and it does for many still. But over time, it has also become closely tied to institutional power. So when people felt excluded from those institutions, the slogan began to feel less like participation and more like branding. And that brings us to linguistic imperialism. International commentary often translates Bangladeshi politics into a very narrow global vocabulary. Islamism, extremism, radicalization, populism. And when that happens, local political language, with all its nuance and history, gets flattened into alarm bells. Language doesn't just describe reality, it decides whose reality counts. And then there's the economy. In Bangladesh, we've seen rising wealth for a very small group and rising insecurity for many others. So scarcity doesn't mean there isn't enough. It increasingly feels like there is enough, but not for you. Social theory calls this relative deprivation, that painful gap between expectations and reality. And when that gap grows and institutional trust weakens, unrest becomes thinkable. Explaining this isn't excusing violence, it's simply trying to understand the conditions in which it becomes possible. So where does this leave us? We absolutely must protect our journalists, our artists, our educators, our minorities. They are the heartbeat of civic life. But rebuilding trust requires more than crisis management or tough statements. It means asking who gets to speak for the nation, who must risk everything to be heard, who is treated as disposable, and who has been left out of the conversation for far too long. Because if we only treat the symptoms, we never heal the wound. And that's what After the Headlines is about, lingering with these questions instead of rushing past them.